The store smelled like money. Polished marble floors reflected crystal lights. Mannequins wore outfits that cost more than some people's yearly rent. Soft classical music floated through the air, designed to slow customers down and remind them they were somewhere exclusive. Evan Brooks didn't belong here. At least, that's what everyone assumed. Evan was 17, black, tall and slim, wearing worn sneakers, a plain hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. He stood near a display of designer jackets, carefully touching the fabric with his fingertips, his eyes focused, curious, respectful. He wasn't browsing for fun, he was studying. A sales associate noticed him immediately, then another. They exchanged a look, the kind that didn't need words. One of them, Melissa, walked over with a tight smile. "Can I help you?" she asked, already glancing at his shoes. "I'm just looking," Evan replied politely. She nodded, but didn't leave. Instead, she stayed close. Too close. Evan moved to another rack. Melissa followed. A security guard shifted near the entrance. Customers began to stare. Evan felt it, the familiar heat in his chest, the pressure of being watched not as a person, but as a potential problem. After a few minutes, Melissa spoke again, louder this time. "Sir, these items are very expensive." "I know," Evan said calmly. She crossed her arms. "Do you?" That was when the store manager appeared, Thomas Keller, mid-40s, immaculate suit, sharp eyes trained to protect the brand's image. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. Melissa didn't hesitate. "He's been hovering, making customers uncomfortable." Evan turned to Keller. "I haven't touched anything improperly. I'm just looking." Keller looked him up and down, not once at his face, but at his clothes. "We don't allow loitering," Keller said coolly. "If you're not making a purchase, I'll have to ask you to leave." Evan swallowed. "I didn't do anything wrong," Keller's voice hardened. "Sir, this is a luxury establishment. We have standards." The word hit like a slap. Customers pretended not to listen. Phones came out quietly. The security guard stepped closer. Evan felt his jaw tighten. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll go." As he walked toward the door, Keller added one last sentence. Quiet, cruel, certain. "Come back when you can afford it." The glass doors closed behind Evan. Outside, the city noise rushed back in. Car horns, voices, life. Evan stood still for a moment, hands clenched, breathing slow. Across the street, a black luxury SUV waited at the curb. The driver watched Evan carefully. He opened the door and stepped out. "Sir," the driver said respectfully, "your father is ready when you are." Evan nodded once and got into the back seat. Inside the car, Evan looked back at the store, the same store that had just kicked him out for not looking rich enough. He didn't look angry, he looked thoughtful, because tomorrow that store's board of directors would be voting on a buyout deal, and the majority shareholder was Evan Brooks's family. They just didn't know it yet. The car door closed softly behind Evan. Inside the SUV, the world felt quieter, insulated from noise, judgment, and stares. Evan leaned back against the leather seat, his jaw still tight, eyes fixed forward. His father, Daniel Brooks, sat across from him. Daniel Brooks didn't look like a billionaire. No flashy watch, no loud confidence, just calm presence, sharp eyes, and the kind of stillness that came from years of being underestimated and winning anyway. "You okay?" Daniel asked. Evan nodded once. "Yeah," but his father knew better. "That store," Daniel said carefully, "wasn't the first place to make a decision about you before hearing your name." Evan exhaled slowly. They didn't even try to hide it. Daniel looked out the window at the storefront disappearing behind them. They never do. At home, Evan went straight to his room. He kicked off his shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, replaying the moment over and over. The way the manager's eyes had scanned him, the word standards, the quiet satisfaction in being told to leave. Later that night, Daniel called Evan into his office. Large screens glowed with financial charts and documents. On one screen was the logo of the luxury brand Evan had visited earlier that day. "Tomorrow morning," Daniel said, "there's a final vote." Evan frowned. "About the acquisition?" Daniel nodded. "Our firm already owns 46%. Enough to influence, not enough to control." Evan stared at the logo. "So they don't know?" he asked. "No," Daniel replied. "They assume we're just another silent investor." Evan remembered the way Keller had spoken to him, so sure, so dismissive. "What happens if the deal goes through?" Evan asked. Daniel leaned back. "Then we become majority owners, and we decide what kind of company this really is." Evan hesitated. "You could have told them who I was." Daniel shook his head. "That would have protected you, but it wouldn't have revealed them." Evan understood then. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. The next morning, Evan dressed simply, not to impress, not to hide, just himself. As they drove downtown, Daniel spoke again. "I built everything I have because doors were closed to me," he said. "Not slammed, just quietly locked. That kind hurts more." Evan nodded. "Tomorrow," Daniel continued, "people will apologize. They'll say it was a misunderstanding." Evan clenched his hands. "I don't want apologies." Daniel smiled faintly. "Good. Then you're ready." As the car pulled up to the corporate tower where the board meeting would take place, Evan felt something steady settle in his chest. The humiliation from yesterday hadn't disappeared. It had transformed, because tomorrow wasn't about proving he was rich enough to shop there. It was about deciding who deserved to belong there at all. And inside that building, the people who had kicked him out were about to learn the cost of mistaking appearance for worth. The boardroom was silent when Evan Brooks walked in. Not because people recognized him, they didn't, but because he didn't look like anyone who usually entered that room. Dark hoodie replaced with a simple jacket, hands relaxed, expression calm. He took a seat beside his father without saying a word. Across the long glass table sat the executives of the luxury brand. Among them was Thomas Keller, the store manager. He was dressed sharply, confident, unaware that the room had already shifted. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "We're here to finalize the acquisition vote. As you know, Brooks Capital has increased its stake." Keller smiled politely. "We're excited about the partnership." Daniel Brooks nodded once. "Before the vote, I'd like to introduce my son." Evan stood. Keller's eyes flicked to him, briefly dismissive, then away. "This is Evan Brooks," Daniel said evenly. "He represents our family's interests." Something changed in Keller's face. Evan stepped forward slowly. "Yesterday," he said calmly, "I visited one of your flagship stores. A few executives exchanged looks. I was followed, watched, and eventually asked to leave." Keller stiffened. Evan continued, voice steady. "I was told to come back when I could afford it." Silence crashed down on the room. Keller's mouth opened. I wasn't aware." "You were," Evan said, turning to face him directly. "You were there." The chairwoman looked sharply at Keller. "Is this true?" Keller's confidence cracked. "We maintain standards. We didn't know who he was." Daniel Brooks leaned forward. "That," he said calmly, "is the problem." He pressed a button on the tablet in front of him. Security footage appeared on the screen. Evan in the store, the associate following him, Keller speaking to him at the door. No sound, no excuses, just truth. The chairwoman exhaled sharply. "This behavior is unacceptable." Keller's voice shook. "It was a misunderstanding." Evan shook his head. "No, it was policy, just never written down." The vote proceeded. One by one, hands were raised. The acquisition passed. Brooks Capital became majority owner. Keller sat frozen. Evan turned to him one last time. "You told me to come back when I could afford it." He paused. "I did." The room felt heavier than before, because the power had shifted, not loudly, not cruelly, but completely, and Keller finally understood. The teenager he had judged by appearance had just decided the future of the brand he thought he protected. And this time there would be no door to hide behind. The consequences were immediate. By the time the board meeting ended, Thomas Keller was no longer the store manager. His access badge was deactivated before he reached the elevator. The sales associate who had followed Evan through the store was placed on leave pending investigation. But Evan didn't feel victorious. He felt clear. The next day, Evan returned to the same luxury store. This time, the glass doors opened instantly. Staff stood straighter. Smiles were wider. Too wide. "Welcome," a new manager said nervously. "How may we assist you?" Evan looked around. The same marble floors, the same racks of clothing. Everything looked identical, but everything felt different. "I'm here to observe," Evan said simply. He watched how employees treated customers who didn't fit the luxury image. Teenagers, people of color, people dressed casually. Old habits died hard. Some associates still glanced too long. Still hovered. Evan noticed everything. That afternoon, Brooks Capital released a public statement. Not defensive, not vague, direct. The brand acknowledged discriminatory practices and announced mandatory retraining, leadership restructuring, and a complete review of in-store policies. Not because of public pressure, but because ownership demanded it. Behind closed doors, Evans spoke to the board. "Luxury isn't about exclusion," he said. "It's about excellence. If you confuse those two, you lose both." Changes followed: new hiring standards, community partnerships, transparent accountability. Within months, the brand's reputation shifted, not quietly, but visibly. And Evan changed too. He didn't start dressing differently, didn't flaunt wealth, didn't seek attention. One evening, he walked past the store again, unnoticed this time, just another young man on the sidewalk. He smiled. Because the point was never to be recognized. It was to make sure the next kid who walked in, curious, respectful, hopeful, wouldn't be judged before being spoken to. At home, Daniel Brooks asked him, "Do you regret not telling them who you were?" Evan shook his head. "No, they treated me exactly how they wanted to treat someone like me." Daniel nodded. "And you treated them exactly how a leader should." Evan looked out the window at the city lights. The humiliation from that first day no longer burned. It had taught him something essential. Power reveals character, but restraint defines it. And the brand that once kicked him out would now have to live up to the standards it claimed to sell. A year later, the brand released its annual report. Sales were up, public trust had recovered, employee turnover had dropped dramatically. But those numbers weren't what Evan Brooks cared about. On a quiet afternoon, Evan stood inside the same flagship store. This time without cameras, without executives, without announcements. Just customers moving freely, comfortably. Near a display of jackets, a black teenage boy stood with his mother. The boy wore a backpack, scuffed sneakers, and an expression Evan recognized instantly. Curiosity mixed with caution. A sales associate approached them, not hovering, not suspicious. Genuine. "Take your time," she said with a smile. "Let me know if you want to try anything." The boy relaxed. Evan felt something settle in his chest. This was the real result. Later that evening, Evan spoke at a small internal leadership meeting. No press, no branding, just truth. "I wasn't kicked out because I couldn't afford your products," he said calmly. "I was kicked out because someone decided I didn't belong before I ever spoke." The room was silent. "That decision cost this company its soul," Evan continued, "and it almost cost it its future." He paused. "You don't build luxury by deciding who gets excluded. You build it by deciding who gets dignity." After the meeting, an older employee approached him quietly. "I've worked retail for 20 years, she said. "This is the first time I've felt proud of where I work." Evan nodded. "Then we're doing it right." That night, Evan walked through the city alone. No security, no entourage, just a young man who had learned early what power could do and what it shouldn't. He didn't forget the humiliation. He transformed it. Because real success isn't proving you're rich enough to enter the room. It's making sure the room no longer decides who deserves to enter. And long after the headlines faded, long after people forgot the buyout, the brand would be remembered for one thing. The day it learned that style without humanity was never luxury at all.